And so then the next topic I wanted to discuss is, because of how you had mentioned, there was during that fake news segment of where that was
Yeah,
really peak in society, you had a lot of hostility towards journalism and the media, because, and I
still
think,
do.
yeah, of course, and I think that
Yeah.
kind of touches on what we've been talking about. I think a lot of that stems from all of us. I think everyone who thinks critically, like regardless of what your political affiliation is, I think we
Hmm.
all kind of have a disdain for quote unquote corporate media.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd like to get your take on trying to simplify what the real
Yeah.
issue is there.
Of course. So, I tell people if you're going to go to corporate media and expect, good, informative news, it's kind of like going to McDonald's and expecting nutrition. You know what I mean? Good nutrition and
Right.
a balanced meal. That's not what it's there for. You just have the challenge of broadcasting. What does that mean, broad? It means it's to appeal to as many people as possible, right? And so it's going to completely wash over nuance. It's going to wash over, I mean, but I think part of why you have the explosion of podcasts and from everything from Joe Rogan to all the long form stuff we see on YouTube and elsewhere in podcast form is because you through broadcasting there is not a high paying audience for long form, just hours and hours of people talking. You know what I mean? That's why you need services like C-SPAN, that are just going to play the House of Representatives hearings, or the Marshall McLuhan. If you've ever heard of him, he was
Yes.
like a media expert and analyzer, right, of media, and he said the medium is the message. Right. So television is necessarily one way. It's going out to you. Part of what's interesting about the internet is I can do my YouTube live stream. You can do your show. And in real time, while I'm talking about it, my viewers can interact with me. It's back and forth. They can drop comments in the chat or questions, and I can respond to them. Television is not that way. To a certain degree, newspapers have been that way, right? Where a newspaper will release the record, the paper of record,
Hmm.
and then they have an opinion section, letters to the editor. People write in, and before people were arguing in the comments, they were arguing on the opinion pages.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and so you have really quick. What was your question
Oh
in the
yeah, you're
beginning
good.
of
No,
this?
so dealing with hostility towards journalism, I know that
Yeah.
you have
Okay.
you had
Okay.
I know you did a coverage of a specific Trump rally, and
Yeah.
so I kind of want to hear about that, and then
Yes.
your more general
Yeah.
the the
Okay.
the, the pitfalls of just
You said
blaming media.
corporate. You said corporate, and so I
Right,
went
right.
with that. So
Of
so
course,
often when people want to blame journalists, they want to, because they're looking at corporate media. They're
right,
just looking at it would be like blaming the entire restaurant industry for obesity, right? When you have, I don't know,
exactly.
you're going to blame the juice bars and the and the organic vegan
Or
restaurants for the obesity
blaming
epidemic.
small business owners for Walmart coming in and taking jobs.
Exactly,
We all know,
exactly.
and we all know corporate media sucks. Like we're all aware of
Yes,
that. The question,
yeah,
the point though is to draw that distinction and understand the dangers of just being anti-journalist or anti-media because of
ex-
that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's a few things to work here. There's that industry critique which I just made, right? But you have people who don't understand. That's why they have this feeling towards journalists. It we see that a lot, especially among I'm on the left, I'm progressive, so I see it a lot with libertarians and people on the right where they don't have a structural industry, or you could say whatever, capitalist critique
Right.
of an industry, and they don't recognize all the impulse, all the structural financial incentives and otherwise that push journalists in certain directions, and whether they don't like or not. Now, that being said, it's because also you just have people who have their politics, and any journalist who reports something against what their politics are, what they already want to hear, is now you're political, you're an enemy, or you're bad, right? The fake news. And I mean, I saw it in examples, just reporting in my local for my local paper, I would have, I would do reporting about, say, an issue that local indigenous farm workers faced. Like here in Santa Maria, we have a lot of people from Oaxaca, and they speak Mixtec, which is not Spanish; it's an indigenous language. So you have these people this whole group of people in the town who are a minority, and they're not getting it's not as easy for them to access education. It's not as easy for them to go through to get services from many different, not just the government but nonprofits or whatever else in town, things they might need, because they have a extra language barrier. So we
Right.
need interpreters in this town who can interpret from Mixteco to Spanish or to English all at the same time, right? But so we would do some story about this is an issue that Mixteco farm workers are, or just residents are facing, and then I would get an angry email or call from a right winger saying, "Well, how come you're not reporting on the other side?" And I go, "Well, what's the other side of this story? This is a story about an issue this community faces." "Well, we don't want them here."
Right.
Okay, but there's not an other side to that story. This story is, here's an issue this part of the community faces, right?
Right. And
Everybody
that's
know. So conservatives want the media, they want everybody to be Fox News or their conservative radio show host, and to only exist on their leaning into their arguments and their bias,
right.
right? And
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 and and I want to be clear.
yeah,
Everyone likes that. We all suffer from the desire for confirmation bias to,
absolutely, absolutely,
to
yeah,
affirm our opinions. We all like hearing that we're
yep,
right, like correct in that term.
yeah,
But I think that's why it's so important to, like, again, always be critical of, no matter what someone's telling you. If someone's telling you information, the first questions you should be asking are, why? Like, what do they have to gain from this? What is
hmm,
backing them? And, like, is there
yeah,
what is their motive? There's always a motive. What is their
absolutely,
motive? And then obviously you have to question the merits of that specific motive. Just because you disagree, just because they say something you don't like, that's okay. Saying I don't like what you said is not a substantive critique. We can talk about why it is you don't like having migrants in this area, which definitely has, in my opinion, a lot of economic factors that are
yeah,
causing, scarcity, fears of economic scarcity in those
yeah,
locals' minds. And I think, yes, we can have a very nuanced conversation about that as well. But
yeah.
yeah, exactly. You have, and especially marginalized groups that do not have the representation to be able to get their story out without some type of conduit.
Mhm.
It's really important to make sure that we give those people a voice.
Yeah, well, but that's paper to paper, and so this is the other thing about, if you want to understand media bias and this kind of it's funny because I would have the anger at us for doing reporting like that from that, like, I could think of one individual in particular who would throw this attack at us. "You're just a liberal rag and this and this and that. How come you don't mention such and such?" Which I know he only knows because he read it in our paper, because nobody else covered that thing. You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's a certain level of they don't, like, there's just a lack of understanding of what's the word I'm looking for. There's a lot of process stuff about journalism that people don't understand. Like I said, the biases towards certain institutions like law enforcement, but then just the difference between how the news section works versus the opinion page versus the arts and entertainment
Right.
section. And I mean, people just don't understand the process of journalism, or how newspapers are ordered, you know what I mean, or what it takes to
Right.
get in the paper. People would call us up all the time and be like, "Hey, can I get a story in there? Well, what is it? How much is it though?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, you don't
Right.
pay for journalism. Like, that's unethical."
That's advertising, not
"Well, why
journalism.
not?" "Yeah, yeah,
Right.
you could talk to advertising." "Well, why can't you just come to a story? How much?" Like, no, 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 no. Like, so it's from every level that people don't understand that. And I don't know if like, and here's the thing. Ever since Trump happened, and there has long been a kind of a right-wing resentment towards media and journalists, and sometimes it gets voiced as the elites, or the the liberal media, or the intellectuals, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you can go back and watch C-SPAN from the 80s with Ronald Reagan, and you can hear people calling into C-SPAN and happy how Ronald Reagan, well, he's telling the media what we want to tell them, that and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But when Trump came out and made the media a target, he put a target on their backs. He literally at rallies would point at the press pool and go, "Look at them! It's them! They're liars!" And no, 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 no. And this isn't even taking into account that most journalists, the vast majority of journalists, are not well paid. It's actually, journalism has for a long time has been blue collar work. For years, I never made more than 30,000 a year as a full-time journalist, even a section editor, in California,
Right.
in
Which
the
is
in the 2000 teens. Right? It's
right.
that's the reality for most journalists. I drive a used Toyota. I'm wearing Costco jeans. You
Right.
know what I mean? So it like that's the reality for journalists. But we, just characterizing all of it, painting just this broad brush over everybody as they're all the New York Times, they're all CNN, they're all MSNBC. It's been massively corrosive,
Of
and
course.
journalists have faced personal attacks, physical attacks. I went out to a Trump rally, and it's my most watched YouTube video because I caught a Trump supporter pushing and taking swings at a counter protester, a counter demonstrator. And before that, I was talking with these Trump supporters, and some of them were totally friendly and asking my questions, but other Trump supporters were calling me fake news and saying, "Do you support pedophiles?" Because Joe Biden and all this
Right.
stuff, right?
Right.
So going into the QAnon stuff. So it's made our jobs more dangerous. And another really concerning thing was, because of the resurgence of Black Lives Matter and media organizations actually showing more skepticism to law enforcement, when this subject we've talked about, the deference to them, they were facing physical attack. Journalists face physical attack across the United States by law enforcement.
Right.
Right. I have a friend, a colleague, and we went to community college classes together, who was shot point blank with a crowd dispersal round in Oregon. There were people who had their eyes shot out, or their eyes are no longer, they're blind in those eyes because of being hit by pepper balls or
Rubber
tear
bullets.
gas
Right.
canisters. Yeah, and and Trump openly celebrated journalists getting hit by pepper balls or whatever it was. An MSNBC reporter.
Yes. 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 And same with like
Yeah,
legal observers. I know a lot of people that
that too.
like
That
it.
too. Yeah. Hmm.
That's why again, the people doing that, it's great for people to talk
Hmm.
about stuff on the internet. Obviously it's a net
Yeah.
positive, but actually going and reporting on the stuff, like actually reporting, going and doing that groundwork that journalists do, and also reporting on that groundwork is really what matters. Like
Yeah.
that's
And really,
all of it's
it's
good, but that
yeah.
is far more important for like building a better society.
Yeah, and it's a cornerstone of our democracy. It's right there in the First Amendment.
Right.
A lot of people like to talk about free speech, but right in there next to it is the freedom of the press, where our rights can't be infringed. Right? I mean, we go into war zones, we go in the
Mm,
middle of riots and unrest, to document what's happening. To let people know this is in fact what's going on in the country. We also there's all different forms of journalists, but
right.
if and that's just the thing. I think for the most part, a lot of Americans want to know if their government's engaged in like corruption, you know what I mean, or any kind of they're so quick. Those stories do sell too, and people want to hear about that. They want to know if their local police department had something like what I mentioned earlier. They're lying to the public or covering things up. But if you recognize law enforcement as a conservative institution, and
Which it
just
is. I mean,
yes, which it
and
is,
which I want to be very clear
uh,
is not saying anything about the individual officers. It is a substantive
No,
critique of that is what left and
ex-
right means
I,
when you go back
yep,
and look, because it stems from the French Revolution, and
yep,
the members of parliament that would support the institutions at the time were on the right side of parliament. The ones that
yep,
wanted to reform it were on the left side. That's where those
yep.
terms come from.
Small c conservatism, small l liberalism,
Right.
and we are a liberal democracy. The founding fathers were radical liberals,
Exactly.
partially because one of the things that they said was you cannot infringe on the rights of the press. They
Right.
get to write what they want to write. And, that even then, I mean, John Adams did what the Sedition Act, which there were Trump people very clearly saying, "Hey, Trump, you should just enact this. Start using this to attack the outlets that you don't like." And
Right.
that is what fake news became after what it originally meant was fraudulent information, propagated online. It became to mean on the right, like that any reporting that I don't like, that
Of
that is
course.
critical of me.
Of course. And what people need to understand is like that conservatives are liberals. They just want to
Yeah,
uphold older versions of liberalism. Like
exactly.
it all stems from the belief in the existence and the right for private property, and the belief that a democracy in some form or another, representative in our case, those two things combined with market capitalism, that's what a liberal is. So that's another
Exactly.
thing, is again back to that whole like left versus liberal. We need to understand that when we're talking,
Hmm.
like, Dennis Prager, is much of a piece of crap he is, like, Dennis Prager calls himself a classical liberal for a reason, and
Hmm.
and of the of Prager's used videos that of course are mostly, they're all crap, but I will say the one that I actually think is accurate for the most part is the one where he talks about leftist versus liberals. Like, he
Yeah.
actually does understand the distinction between them, which I think
Yep.
most people in America do not, because they're so
Yep.
caught up in the duopoly of like conservatives versus liberals. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings back the whole point of the hostility towards the media, towards the media elite, right? We need to
Hmm.
understand that, and we need to, it's important to like discuss with those people, to talk about, like, what is it that's actually the issue? Because yes, you do have like, you're not wrong. Like, you are wrong in
Hmm.
as far as like saying that, journalism is bad, but the reason you're saying it, you're not on the wrong path. Like, you understand that, hey, these interests that manufacture consent through the
Hmm.
donors, that be in the favor of the donors and lobbyists that they have at the corporate media level, yes, what they are doing is directly screwing over the average person, right? It does
Yeah.
it does not benefit us. Now, the fact that
Yeah.
you're getting that messaging from a person that inherited more wealth than you or I will ever know, who is literally an elite, talking about Donald Trump in
Yeah.
this case, you kind of have to question and say, hey, maybe he's part of this. Like, nobody,
Yeah. No, but
it's
that's why you need a structural critique. So you can have
exactly.
when I hear media elite, I know people are thinking about just who you don't like on cable news.
Right. They're
But
talking about George Soros. They're just not being direct.
well, when
Like,
I think of media elite, I think of Rupert Murdoch. I think of Michael
I think of Tucker
Bloomberg. I
Carlson, yeah.
think of, well, no, I'm thinking about the owners
Of the
like
owner, of
Rupert
course.
Murdoch,
Of course.
Michael Bloomberg, Ted Turner,
Bloomberg
even
is, yeah.
Jeff Bezos.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we're at the
Washington.
point
Yep.
now where billionaires, the wealth class can just buy their own media, create their own media. You might have the Koch brothers who just disseminate, spread seed in a field and pasteurize all these other, smaller entities on their own to just create, right wing talking points into the discourse, right?
Exactly.
Whether it's in think tanks or nonprofits or media, I mean, Dave Rubin is getting money from the, like
Yeah.
people who across this atmosphere or this ecosystem of media, including the new online media, like they have the means to spread those ideas themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody bankrolls the left, right?
Exactly.
And not the liberals. I mean the left. I'm a
Right.
left progressive journalist. No, like I don't. There's not piles of money sitting around for me
No.
like there are for a Dave Rubin or Crowder or
Oh, yeah.
Prager. Dennis, you mentioned Dennis Prager,
Right.
but
It's the most
you
egregious
have
and
to.
obvious.
Yeah, of course, and he's a propagandist,
Right.
and so we need to be clear about these things because now all the it's all mixed together. If I were a lawmaker, I would try to make an education law that introduced critical thinking,
Absolutely. Yeah.
logic,
Oh yeah, I'm a heavy.
media literacy, like from kindergarten on, just like basic critical thinking in
Right.
every step of the curriculum. That would be my what a thing I would try to do. Of course, education has been attacked and defunded in all these
Of
different
course.
ways, but that I find would be important because people don't even know. Like I went to talk to a high school class years ago when I was editor of the paper, and I asked them, "Hey guys, where do you get your news from? What's the source for your news?" And they all went, "Facebook." I said, "Facebook is not a news source. It's just a platform. What are you reading? Like, where are you getting your news?" And none of them could say. And of course they're kids. You don't
Of
want to put
course,
kids
but
on the spot, but that's a whole thing where. And then we know the algorithms are siloing people and balkanizing people. Already before social media, we had corporate news, cable news balkanized along political lines because of the market pressure. Fox News came around, was overtly conservative, called everyone else liberal media, and in a certain degree to survive because they netted the majority of the market. You
yeah.
saw CNN and MSNBC
And I want to
tack in the directions they went in order to address the market pressure. That's just a
and I want
market.
to insert one thing there that
Yeah.
that people that think like, oh, CNN is liberal and this and that, just so everyone's clear, Rupert Murdoch started Fox because he didn't get to buy CNN. Like,
I'm old enough to remember when CNN was boring.
yeah,
When it was just just I remember this is topical. Lou Dobbs was on CNN,
right.
and he was just boring Lou Dobbs, and he didn't
Well,
really have
and
anything
Tucker, when
opinion at all. Tucker was there
Bowtie
too, but
Tucker was on there, like,
Bowtie Tucker had an opinion. Lou Dobbs was just a reader of the
right.
news. He didn't offer commentary. But then Fox News comes along, and then he hops over to Fox, and I kind of see in the media world going conservative. It's kind of like going country. You know what I mean? Like you have an automatic
Mm-hmm.
audience
Yeah.
set up for you if you do it.
And it's
And
very niche down. You'll get more, like, it's easier to succeed within that market,
it's
and it's just,
profitable. It's
yeah.
way more. There's way more money there.
There's
You know?
more money. It's a smaller subset, more targeted niche. Like, yeah, it makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
It's the same as like people. I remember because of growing up in rural North Carolina and Georgia as a kid. I know people would always like jokingly say like, "Oh, George Strait has more number ones than Eminem." It's like, yeah, that's on the country chart versus the Billboard chart.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like comparing your high school track meet, like county track meet
Yeah.
versus the U.S.
Yep.
trials. It's not
And
the same comparison. Like,
they control
but
control
then
who
add the
is
money.
comes in.
Right. Then you,
I mean, what was that song, Old Town Road?
yes, yes, yes.
He went to the top of the country chart. They kicked him off of the country chart. They said he doesn't belong here. This is a rap song. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So conservative media will do that too. Nancy Grace went against the new God King Donald Trump,
Right.
so she got iced out of it, and then she tried to go to the more center liberal, cable outlets, and it's like you're the lady who told people that Santa's white, he's not black. So we're not going to forget that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to me, the interesting thing now that we've seen is Fox News has, Fox News was an outgrowth of conservative talk radio,
Right. Like
which is
Limbaugh
a direct result of
and Hannity.
which is a direct result of the end of the fairness doctrine, where in broadcast you specifically had to bring on people with opposing viewpoints and give them equal time. Once that ended, then you had conservative talk radio.
I had not heard that before. That's actually really interesting.
Yes. And so Fox News followed that in the 90s, and it just balkanized. I mean, you want to talk about the polarization. Social media has just taken all these incentives that already existed, cranked them up to 10, siloed people and pushed them in more extreme directions. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. No, absolutely.
it's complicated. It's a big, there's a lot to it. But at the heart of it is like, where's the money being made?
Yeah.
There's a reason why Noam Chomsky was always a boutique published author who, a bunch of left Americans, have supported across all these years, but he never stopped being a college professor. You know what I mean? He always had to pay his bills that way.
Right.
But there's, Bill O'Reilly every couple of years can put out his new The Death of Lincoln, or
Yeah.
killing
Kennedy,
JFK,
yeah,
killing
exactly.
Liberty, or whatever new thing he's, and my favorite thing is he had the book called Culture Warrior, which
Right.
they just they're letting you know what they're up to. You know what I mean? That this is their project, right? And me as a left progressive journalist, I'm trying to inform people about things that maybe they're not aware of, because not only are you not gonna get it from conservative, I mean, of course you're not, but you're not even going to get it from the local, what a conservative would call the liberal media. No, this is just a corporate newspaper. They're trying to appeal to everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it doesn't serve their monetary interest to let you know, hey, there's a bunch of local leftists who are organizing mutual aid, and they're like, fuck the church, pardon my language,
Of
on your
course. Yeah.
channel, because they're indigenous and they want to tear down statues of Juniper Serra, the mission, the guy who helped start the missions in the state. You're not going to get that even from the paper I came from, because even as an editor there, I would, if I tried to report on that, I would have gotten pressure from other editors, even from the publisher, probably, to be like, this is very just hyper focused, specialized. Like, we're trying to appeal to this larger audience. And I'm not sure that is even, you could say that's wrong and that's bad. That's a bias against leftism in America, but at the end of the day, that they're also just trying to make money and appeal to,
Right.
who they know is going to buy the advertising,
And that kind of comes down to the reality that within a market-based system that is, that commodifies media and basically
yeah,
everything, that is what's going to happen. And yes, we can
yeah,
understand that no, it is not quote unquote wrong for them to do that
hmm,
within the capitalist system that we live in. However, we
yeah,
can understand that it is antithetical to what is good for the average person who wants to be better informed, you know?
yeah,
And
exactly. and
so they're
and
not
the
bad
profit
people,
motive is
right?
huge.
They're not bad
Yeah,
people. That inherent incentive is the problem. And that's why I
yeah,
think looking at models towards similar to what the BBC does, where it's much more of a,
yeah.
public focused, not profit driven
Yeah,
media.
I tell people, if you want like the cable news channel, format, but no, with a lot of the less of what I was just talking about, go watch PBS NewsHour.
Yeah.
Judy Woodruff is a pro. You know what I mean? Like, when people were
Yes.
complaining, I can't believe CNN and MSNBC and everybody's talking to Stormy Daniels, and Puerto Rico is the Hurricane Maria has just destroyed Puerto Rico. PBS NewsHour, the whole front half hour of the 40 minutes of the whole dang news hour was just Puerto Rico. So like, there are places you can go for it. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think what we're seeing now on social media and on all these different platforms, YouTube and Twitch and otherwise, is now this new generation of actual leftist, people trying to start their own media, just because they recognize nobody's going to do it for them, nobody's going to bankroll them. They just, they have to do it, and everybody's gaining their followings, and now they're going to war with each other, and we
Of
see all
course,
that.
but
It's
but
balkanizing itself.
seeing especially Twitch, seeing the AOC with Ilhan Omar and Hassan Piker,
Yeah,
Twitch
playing.
streaming
Yeah,
to 500,000 people. That's
yeah,
beautiful to see. It's
yeah,
beautiful because of the fact that regardless of whether a person disagrees with those people politically, if you do, well, then you should probably be pushing for the same thing on your side and see
exactly.
who which while I think we can all say that generally speaking, yes, we average people always have some amount of disdain for politicians. I think we can understand that there is a substantive difference between politicians that are actually willing to interact with
Hmm.
real people,
Yeah,
and I think it shows.
yep. Absolutely, and I mean, yeah, to me, that these representatives are just meeting people where they're at, which
Exactly.
is
Which is
on
what,
those channels, and that's the weird thing about social media is you have all these people freaking out about AOC talking about her personal experience with the Capitol attack, and going, she needs to get to work, she's a politician, I don't want to hear about her personal life. Well, then why are you watching her personal social media
right.
platform where she's talking to people who she has an audience for that, you know what I mean? And you can
Don't,
criticize them for it, but she's literally, it's like,
yeah,
9 or 10 at night, she's on her personal thing and she's talking about how she felt about something,
exactly. Which is, hey,
sorry,
don't be so triggered, dude. Like,
exactly. Politicians do that all the time. You can hear it just because they used to go to the local whatever meeting or the Kiwanis Club and talk about their personal feelings there instead of on these massive platforms.
right.
It's the same thing.
And which is it? Do you want, because there was always that whole, like, what was it? The teleprompter gate, like the whole thing about Obama reads off a teleprompter.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah, exactly.
which do you
Yeah.
want? Do you want someone being emotional raw with you
Yeah.
on social media, or do you want them reading from a teleprompter? You got to pick one. You can't just say, I don't like it because
Yeah.
I disagree with this person.
That's something that the online generation just demands is authenticity. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And because so much of us interact and live online that, and we, there is a hyper cynicism that is, it just comes with being online discourse. And part of that is, I mean, that's why people responded so negatively to Pete Buttigieg, is because everything seemed rehearsed. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
And to a
Yeah.
certain degree, you have to recognize the success that Trump had with the fact that he let it all hang out, and would,
Right.
cuss and make, crass jokes, and, be authentically, himself,
Yeah.
bad in my opinion,
Milk
you know,
toast. Oh, of course. Of course. Terrible.
authentically himself, but people recognize that he was being who he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not the polished, thank you
Milk
very much.
toast
You know what I mean?
technocratic
Yeah.
politicians are not going to, like, that's the issue. You have those people, that's the norm. That's what people are used to, because they're used to there being
Exactly.
much more of a barrier to entry because of much less of a, I wouldn't necessarily call it democratization of media, but what I mean
Yeah.
is that it used to be there were more barriers for you to be able to get on a platform like, cable. Now with the internet, you don't
Absolutely.
have that.
Absolutely. And that is a good thing about the internet and social media. Um, we can have a whole conversation
Oh, yeah.
about like the editorial responsibility of social media companies and, where are they responsible and all of that. We can get into that.
If you enjoyed this clip, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out the full live version of the Wealth for 99 podcast, where we talk finance, economics, and public policy from a working class perspective. We'll see you there.